Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are undertaking a really granular, very focused exploration of history. Not, global history, but the kind of meticulously documented history of the American Pit Bull Terrier, the APBT.
That's right. We've got some incredible source material here that gives us this almost unprecedented look into the lineage, the culture, and really the competitive career of one single, highly significant dog, champion mechanic. And he also achieved Register of Merit status.
That ROM designation, yeah, that's crucial. We should definitely get into what that means for a bloodline later on.
Absolutely. So our mission today really is a deep, almost didactic exploration. Think of it like a masterclass, maybe, for anyone interested in the competitive history of this breed. We're using Mechanic's life story as basically a definitive case study.
Right, a window into that whole world.
Exactly. We're going to pull out the essential knowledge points. So things like the breeding philosophy, the really intense training methodology, the protocols around weight and preparation, and those specific cultural codes that define the game dog world back then.
Yeah, this specific narrative, it feels like a perfect way to understand why these specific lines were so valued, and maybe more importantly, how their champions were actually made, minute by minute, decision by decision.
That's it.
And before we really jump into the sheer intensity of this subject, because it is intense, we need to acknowledge the source. This incredible level of detail, it comes directly from a really dedicated historical community.
It does.
And we want to remind you, the listener, that this history, and honestly, hundreds more hours of related content, you can find it all on the web in the YouTube channel APBT INFO. Their commitment to actually archiving this material, well, that's what lets us study a single dog's career with this much depth.
It really speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About the value they placed on pedigree and performance. For the handlers, the breeders involved back then, these dogs weren't, just animals. They were like living proof of generations of selective breeding.
Living proof.
Yeah. Every weigh-in, every referee chosen, every single scratch in a match, it was all logged. Because that data, that information, was considered the absolute foundation of the line's future legacy.
Absolutely. And when you start reading Mechanic's story, you realize immediately this wasn't some, preordained path to glory. The initial shock factor, for me anyway, was how dramatic his early life was.
Right.
Before he ever stepped into a competitive square, he lived through this ordeal that genuinely tested the very foundation of his resilience. It's quite something.
And that early test, that immediate challenge just to survive, that's also what distinguishes the truly exceptional dog in these kinds of narratives.
Yeah.
His innate desire, that quality they were trying to breed for, it was arguably forged, not in the square initially, but in trauma.
It's hard to really wrap your head around that level of, innate resilience. So let's track back. Let's see how Pit Stop Kennels laid the foundation for that spirit. This brings us to Section 1, the foundation and early trials of Scam Mechanic.
Okay.
So he was bred and raised by Pit Stop Kennels, clearly a product of careful selection. He was one of 9 pups in the litter, pretty robust, 5 males and 4 females. But even as a puppy, the sources flag something pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that's something remarkable. That's the key ingredient, isn't it? It's the desire, or what they call game. It's this internal, almost relentless drive that, experts argue you can't really train it into a dog.
It has to be
It has to be there. And Mechanic apparently displayed it shockingly early. We're talking just 5 months old.
And I appreciate the detailed anecdote in the source because it's so vivid. He apparently escaped his kennel while it was being cleaned, and he didn't just, wander off.
No.
He immediately targeted the biggest, most established dog in the entire yard. It was a completely unprovoked, calculated, aggressive move by a 5-month-old pup.
And this wasn't just a quick little scuffle either. The source says the resulting chaos required the kennel man, plus other people. It specifies plural help just to break up the fight.
Wow.
So think about that. A dog so young, physically immature, already has the conviction, the drive, to go hard against a dominant adult dog. That had to be an unmistakable signal to Pit Stop Kennels.
Absolutely. Like, this one's different.
This dog was special. And maybe it defined his future propensity to, drive hard against larger, more established opponents. That trait certainly proved crucial later in his career.
So he lived the good life, as the source puts it. He's this promising young dog. It looks like he's destined for great things until he was 10 months old.
Right.
And then the whole trajectory of his life just gets threatened by this gut punch, the theft. He and his sister were stolen, and they were missing for almost a month.
Yeah, and this is where you see that competitive community culture kind of shift gears into a rescue effort. They didn't just, passively report the dogs missing. They mobilized.
They got active.
They got active. They found his sister, fine-tuned first, and they did that by leveraging contacts and close friends within that community. Finding the sister, that was the key clue that identified the thieves.
Oh, okay.
And then they were contacted, apparently with a very clear, uncompromising message that it was definitely in their best interest to return Mechanic immediately.
But, given that trauma, the violence of being stolen, held captive, isn't there a risk that a dog would develop, like, severe kennel shyness or anxiety or just distrust instead of that unwavering heart you need for competition? Did the sources mention if the breeder's worried about that the trauma might damage his mental fortitude?
That's a really fundamental question, isn't it? And the sources, they don't really detail the psychological recovery per se, but they focus intensely on the physical condition he was in when they got him back.
Yeah.
And it was devastating. When he was returned, the description is just heartbreaking, but clinical. He was near death, weighed only 41 pounds.
41 pounds?
Which was significantly under his eventual, 51-pound competitive weight. He was weak, severely dehydrated, malnourished, and worse, he had open sores all over his body.
Yeah.
And the source notes, very starkly, he had not a hair on his head.
41 pounds. For a dog whose fighting weight would eventually be 51 pounds, that's like a 20% deficit. To endure that level of physical collapse and still somehow retain the drive for life.
Yeah.
It's just astounding.
And his recovery, it wasn't just luck, it was a real testament to dedication. It required, as the source says, TLC and sound medical care.
Right.
And it specifically credits someone named Yankee Greg for helping him bounce back to health. And that detail's vital, I think. Well, it tells you that while the competition is obviously fierce, there's also this community aspect of caring for these dogs, supporting valuable bloodlines, even if they belong to rivals or partners. It seems to be a core tenet of the culture. They recognize the value of the bloodline itself kind of transcends who owns the dog right now.
That's an interesting point. So he didn't just survive. He came back strong enough to start the next phase of his career. At 60 months old, fully recovered, rebuilt, he was turned over to the Yankee Boys.
Right.
And this handoff, this marks the official start of his transition, doesn't it? From this promising but damaged pup to a focused competitive force.
Exactly. Once Mechanic, or Mickey the Mechanic as they called him, was with the Yankee Boys, the focus shifted entirely. It became all about assessment and development, which brings us neatly into Section 2, entering the square.
Okay.
And this stage is absolutely crucial because it's where that potential gets measured against reality through controlled testing.
And the first step in that measurement was these initial rolls. Now, for listeners who might be less familiar with the jargon, a roll isn't like a formal match with, public stakes or anything.
No, not at all.
It's more like a controlled, timed sparring session, usually with a seasoned dog, right?
Yeah.
And it's designed purely to assess a prospect's style, their desire, endurance, potential, all without risking, ideally, permanent injury or full conditioning. It's like the curriculum before the final exam.
That's a good way to put it. And in Mickey's very first roll, he apparently demonstrated two attributes that immediately set him apart. First, his fighting style was described as doesn't mouth.
Doesn't mouth? What does that mean exactly?
Well, it's high praise. Mouthing is considered inefficient. It's like grabbing, letting go, repositioning testing holds. A dog that doesn't mouth is committed. It locks on instantly and drives the issue. It minimizes wasted energy and maximizes pressure.
Okay, so very direct, very focused.
Precisely. And his physical attributes complemented that efficiency. The source mentions tremendous strength and superior speed.
Right. But what's particularly fascinating here, I think, is that the Yankee Boys didn't just rely on one roll. The sources emphasize they observed him improving each time he stepped in the square. What does that tell us about mechanics, like intelligence or adaptability?
Yeah, that's key. It confirms he wasn't just a physical powerhouse. He was a learner. He seemed to process the immense stress of that fight environment almost instantly. So if he was countered one way in, say, roll A, he'd adapt his technique for roll B. This adaptability, this rapid learning curve, that's often the hallmark of a truly top-tier performer. It allowed him to internalize lessons that would, save him crucial seconds in a formal match down the line.
Okay, so after observing his performance, his recovery, the team settled on his ideal competitive weight, 51 or 52 pounds. Why is establishing this weight so critical? Is it just about physical efficiency, or does it also relate to that cultural standard of, fairness?
It's definitely both. And the discipline required to get there is immense. Weight parity, hitting the agreed weight exactly, is a Huge mark of honor in this culture.
Mhm.
If you agree to 51 pounds, you must hit 51 pounds. Precisely. So determining the optimal weight, where the dog is leanest, but still incredibly powerful, that takes weeks of precise feeding, exercise, measurement. It really is a science.
Wow. And before they actually committed him to a high-stakes formal match, they ran some further prep sessions. The sources tell us he demolished 2 reasonably good dogs.
Right.
And this wasn't just described as good conditioning, it showcased his ability to capitalize on any weakness he saw.
Yes, and that phrase, in a truly devastating fashion, that tells you everything you need to know. He wasn't just grinding out long, weary wins in these prep rolls.
No.
He was establishing a reputation, even then, as a quick, strong finisher. That ability to break down an opponent both psychologically and physically, that defined his identity early on. And it established the reputation that would soon precede him into his formal career.
And that reputation landed him immediately on the competitive map, didn't it? Leading straight to his first official high-stakes match. So we move into Section 3, championing the cause. And the backstory here is brilliant because it actually involves his brother, WCC's Modine.
Yeah, this competitive world, it's small, and lineage analysis is just paramount. You see it constantly. Mechanic's brother, Modine, he was a 46-pound dog, tested at 48 pounds.
Okay.
The opponents, known as the Keystone Kid and Frenchie, they used a 51-pound Giroux-bred dog named Nixon for the official game test. Now, this wasn't just a casual roll. This was a trial by fire, a serious high-stakes assessment of Modine's fundamental desire, his game.
And Modine's test lasted an astonishing 55 minutes. This is where we really get into the purest definition of game in this culture.
Yeah.
Something called crawling game. What exactly does that look like? Why is it so significant?
Crawling game is really the ultimate demonstration of heart and willingness, especially when the body has essentially failed. The source says Modine was going out at 54 minutes. He fell 4 times.
Wow.
But the non-negotiable criterion, the absolute must, is that he always made it back to the scratch line in under 10 seconds. The source confirms this specific behavior.
So even completely spent.
Exactly. Even when physically spent, damaged, struggling to even stand, the dog retains that mental drive, that imperative to return to the fray. Modine's performance in that sense was flawless in demonstrating game.
So Modine's performance, even though he technically lost that test, it elevated Nixon's status as a formidable opponent, right? But critically, it also gave the Yankee Boys essential strategic intelligence on the Giroux line that Nixon represented.
Precisely. They now knew Nixon was a legitimate, properly tested dog. So Nixon became a formal match prospect, opened by the Keystone Kid at 50 pounds. And the Yankee Boys accepted the challenge for Mechanic.
Now, the sources mentioned they felt 50 pounds was actually a little too light for Mickey, so why accept the challenge at a weight they considered maybe disadvantageous?
Well, that's where the confidence comes in, isn't it? Accepting terms slightly below their ideal weight, which means a stricter, tougher weight cut for the dog, that's a sign of absolute faith in your dog's superiority.
Okay.
They were essentially saying, we are so confident in Mechanic's ability and his conditioning that we'll take a slight physical disadvantage just to prove the point. So they accepted the match at 50 pounds.
The night arrived. The sources make sure we know the match was officiated by a Mr. Bill. That feels like an essential detail. Referees weren't just timekeepers, were they?
Oh, absolutely not. They were trusted arbiters. Their reputation, their presence, upheld the integrity of the match, and really the integrity of the entire culture surrounding these events. Having someone like Mr. Bill there meant it was legitimate.
Right. So let's get into the fight details. After 10 minutes, the dogs were set. Nixon was described as ripped and ready, a physically perfect specimen at 51 pounds, even though the match was at 50.
Yeah.
But what happened next seems to be a demonstration of internal will over just external physique.
That's exactly how the source portrays it. The turning point, according to them, was the immediate relentless pressure applied by Mechanic right from the start. You could apparently visibly see the difference in desire. Nixon's scratches, his returns to the line, they started slowing down noticeably, and he began fading fast. This is that moment where intrinsic drive, that game, overcomes even peak physical conditioning. Nixon was ready, yes, but Mechanic was just relentless. He sustained a level of pressure that Nixon simply could not match over the long haul.
And the sources are very clear. Nixon stopped at exactly 1 hour. That's a long, grinding fight. Demands incredible stamina, pain tolerance.
Absolutely.
And Mechanic secured his first formal win by going hard to the chest. Why that specific target area? What's the significance?
Well, targeting the chest is strategic. It's efficient. You're aiming for the vital engine of the dog, the lungs, the heart. The goal is to cause collapse and end the contest quickly and decisively, rather than getting into prolonged battles focused on, say, legs or the head.
So it shows focus.
It shows a dog that is focused on termination, on finishing the job. Mechanic proved right there in his first match that the ordeal of his early life, the theft, the recovery, it hadn't diminished his fighting spirit at all. In fact, you could argue it had maybe reinforced his need to survive and drive forward.
And just like that, Mechanic was a one-time winner, poised for the next level. And we want to make sure that those of you listening, especially those who appreciate the historical dedication to these lines, know that the history of this dog, Sikh Mechanic, and hundreds of others like him are available to explore further. Just check out the web and YouTube channel, APBT INFO.
Yeah, it's an amazing resource. So Mechanic's dominance against a respected dog like Nixon, it immediately established his reputation. And that reputation started causing, well, complications. Which brings us to Section 4, navigating the culture forfeits and failed hooks.
Right. The rise was so quick that immediately following that Nixon win, the Yankee Boys collected 2 forfeits at 52 pounds. 2 forfeits back to back. That tells us something pretty fundamental about the competitive climate surrounding Mechanic at that point, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It means opponents were actively avoiding him. A forfeit happens when teams agree to a match, they set the date, the weight, the stakes, but then the opponent either backs out late or just doesn't show up at all.
So they lose their stake money.
Exactly. They're forced to surrender the stake money. So, while it was financially advantageous for the Yankee Boys, it confirms that Mechanic's devastating finishing ability had definitely preceded him. People were apparently willing to lose money rather than risk their dog against him.
Wow. His win streak, or maybe just his reputation, however, led to a confrontation that wasn't settled in the square. It was more about a breach of cultural protocol involving someone named Joe M. from Delaware.
Yes, the Joe M. incident.
They hooked up, agreed on 4 dogs per side for an event. But Joe M. arrived with what the source describes quite pointedly as a small army.
Yeah, and that's a classic example of a cultural conflict in this world. Bringing a small army implies bringing excessive, maybe intimidating support staff or just non-essential people. It breaches the agreed-upon etiquette of the hook.
So it's like posturing.
It's often seen as an attempt at psychological dominance or intimidation before the dogs even get near each other, trying to unsettle the other side.
And the tension was immediate. The source confirms we had words, and consequently, the match just didn't happen. The atmosphere, that breach of protocol, it made the logistics or maybe even the physical safety of the event just untenable.
But the Yankee Boys, to their credit, attempted to salvage the integrity of the competition itself. They rescheduled the rematch just 3 days later. They used the same agreed-upon referee, Ray, but they moved it to a completely different neutral spot. They were trying to neutralize that hostile logistical element.
They wanted the dogs to settle it.
Exactly. They were focused on the dogs, not the drama surrounding it.
And here's maybe the ultimate test of character in this specific subculture. Joe M. never showed up for the rescheduled match.
Didn't even call.
Didn't even call Ray the neutral referee. And Ray then apologized for Joe M.'s behavior, which shows the referee's personal commitment to fairness, even when one of the competitors failed to uphold their end.
Yeah, and the Yankee Boys' response is just so pragmatic and deeply revealing of their value system. They reportedly said, "Forget it, Ray. It's not your fault. Joe isn't a man of his word. You live and learn."
You live and learn.
That phrase is critical. In this community, integrity, adhering to verbal agreements, it's basically non-negotiable. Joe M.'s actions marked him not just as maybe a poor competitor, but as unreliable, lacking in the required honor. And this whole experience, this failure of character from an opponent, it probably prepared the Yankee Boys for the next big challenge.
Yeah, that cultural learning seems important. It prepared them for the next significant challenge, which came from a different Joe, Joe T. This introduces us to Section 5, the weight disadvantage, the second match against Poker. Joe T called, and he was boasting about his dog, Poker, who is apparently a son of the famous Crick gambler.
Right. And Joe T immediately engaged in this kind of psychological tactic, almost trash talk. He told Yankee Boy George, one of the key figures in the Yankee Boys team, that if Mickey were just a little bigger, he'd whack him for us.
Wow. Okay.
It was clearly a slight. designed to exploit the physical reality that Mechanic was generally the smaller dog in these higher weight classes, suggesting he wasn't really worthy of fighting a true son of Gambler.
And George's countermove, according to the source, was pretty legendary. It notes that he got quiet for a moment and then did something apparently out of character.
What did he do?
Instead of arguing about size, he challenged Joe T's claim about Poker's lineage directly. He basically implied that Poker wasn't a true representation of Trait Gambler's greatness, and then he accepted the match instantly. You got it, I'll take your offer.
Ah, brilliant.
Yeah.
That move completely flipped the psychological pressure right back onto Joe T, didn't it? Called his bluff on the dog's quality.
Exactly. So the match was set for 7 weeks later, and again, refereed by Ray, the same referee from the canceled Joe M match. And this fight starkly highlighted the issue George had accepted, the weight disparity. Mechanic was giving up a significant 3.5 pounds to Poker. Now, in a world of 50-pound dogs, 3.5 pounds isn't a slight difference.
No, it's huge. That's like asking a boxer to fight a full weight class up, especially after a tough cut. It demands superior skill and, crucially, superior game.
So let's talk about the tactical setup here. Joe T's dog, Poker, was apparently built for agility and control. He was described as a very slick head dog. What does a head dog prioritize strategy-wise versus Mechanic's known chest-driving style?
A slick head dog prioritizes control, position, and defense. They aim to steer the opponent, often working the head and neck, trying to tire out the neck and shoulders. The goal is to prevent the opponent from gaining purchase on vital lower areas like the chest or brisket. It's a strategy often designed to exploit a speed or weight advantage. And the source mentions Joe T was seen laughing and encouraging Poker while he was on the head. It was a confident strategy, designed specifically to exploit Mechanic's size disadvantage by forcing him into a long, physically draining positional battle.
And for the first 16 minutes, apparently the strategy worked perfectly. The source describes the action as all Poker steering and Mickey driving. So Mickey was using sheer power and relentless forward pressure to counter the control, but the physical price was high.
How high?
Mechanic sustained 2 chest leaks during this period. Expert speaker, we really need to detail what a chest leak actually entails and what it means for a dog to continue fighting through that kind of injury.
Yeah, a chest leak is serious business. It's generally understood as a deep puncture, typically penetrating the rib cage. It could easily cause internal bleeding or potentially even lung damage, affecting breathing.
Right.
To sustain 2 such injuries and still maintain the intensity required to drive the fight forward, that is a profound demonstration of pain tolerance and sheer willingness. It means the dog is physically compromised, its ability to breathe, sustain stamina, maintain oxygenation is severely tested, yet that mental command to press forward remains absolute. This really confirms that quality of game beyond just a standard definition.
He kept pressing despite the leaks. And then the source provides this really dramatic turning point. Mickey hits black gold. This sounds like crucial jargon. What is black gold in the context of a fight like this? What's its consequence?
Black gold is very specific high-level jargon within that world. It refers to a single, devastating, often crippling strike. A shot that lands perfectly in a critical area, maybe the sternum, a major vessel that effectively disables the opponent's ability to drive or breathe or move effectively. It can cause almost instantaneous systemic shock.
So it's a game changer.
It's the game changer. It's the moment the fight shifts instantly and irrevocably. It moves from being that tactical, positional battle Poker was winning back to Mechanic's specialty. The decisive, overwhelming finish.
And once Mechanic hit black gold, Poker was effectively done. The source says Poker was meant to scratch at the 22-minute mark, but was physically unable to make it back to the line.
Couldn't answer the call.
Couldn't answer. So Mechanic, despite those 2 severe chest leaks, despite giving up 3.5 pounds, scratched hard to a down dog, securing his second major win. This victory just cemented his reputation, didn't it? Not just for finishing power, but for incredible game under extreme duress against a very talented, larger head-style dog.
Absolutely. Having dispatched 2 really formidable opponents, Nixon, the long-fading rival, and Poker, the technical, larger challenger Mechanic was now officially a 2-time winner. Only one more decisive victory stood between him and the highly coveted champion status, which leads us right into Section 6, champion status and retirement.
Okay, the final hurdle. The final challenge came quickly, it seems, from CP Kennels and the skipper. They had their own 2-time winner named Dirty Lamar, and this dog was from the respected Sorrells bred line.
Right, and the pedigree of the opponent here is significant again. Sorrells lines were generally known for their endurance and tactical ability. So Lamar presented a genuine, credible threat on paper. They challenged Mechanic at 52 pounds. This final match had absolutely incredible stakes, champion status for whichever dog won.
And again, George made the arrangements. And they ensured Mr. Bill, the same referee for Mechanic's very first match against Nixon, was agreed upon to officiate this championship bout.
That recurring role of the referee really underscores the established trust, doesn't it? The reliance on these neutral, respected figures within that circuit to ensure fairness, especially when the stakes are this high.
Yeah, absolutely. So the physical state of the dogs at the weigh-in was apparently peak. The source describes both of them as being on weight and look like chiseled granite.
Chiseled granite. That really emphasizes the peak conditioning, the disciplined preparation required just to get to that point, ready to compete for a championship. No corners cut.
None at all. When they clashed in the middle, the strategies unfolded pretty much as you'd expect based on their reputations, right? Lamar went to the head, trying to repeat Poker's strategy of control and attrition.
And Mickey driving relentlessly for the chest, aiming for that quick, devastating finish he was now famous for.
But this time, the quick finish came incredibly fast, like shockingly fast for a championship bout between two-time winners. The source says Lamar made a bad mistake at only 9 minutes into the fight.
9 minutes, wow.
Yeah, and that mistake allowed Mechanic to get in. What kind of lapse in judgment or defense could possibly constitute a bad mistake that ends a high-stakes match that quickly?
Well, for a dog fighting a known, powerful chest driver like Mechanic, a bad mistake usually means exposing a vital, non-defensible area. Maybe turning slightly at the wrong moment, getting pushed off balance, or just allowing Mechanic to bypass that defensive shield of the neck and shoulders for even a second. Once Mechanic gains solid purchase on the chest, given his power and style, the fight progresses exponentially faster. It sounds like it was a momentary lapse in tactical discipline, perhaps under immense pressure, that cost Lamar absolutely everything.
And the action was that decisive. The observers knew it was over almost immediately. The source says the skipper, Lamar's handler, was warned emphatically to save his dog. Pick him up, and now W.
But he didn't.
Apparently not quickly enough, or perhaps he couldn't. Lamar was finished just 3 minutes later at the astonishing 12-minute mark.
12 minutes. For a championship match against another proven two-time winner. That is a profound demonstration of terminal dominance. Just undeniable, swift, and brutal.
Yeah. Mechanic scratched hard to what was left of Lamar, officially making him champion Mechanic. 3 matches. 3 decisive but very different wins. Each one demonstrated a different facet of his superiority. Stamina against Nixon, game and pain tolerance against Poker, and just raw terminal speed and power against Lamar.
An incredible run.
Yeah.
But now we get to what you might call the emotional or maybe the ethical climax of the narrative, moving beyond the square itself.
Right. The original agreement, the source highlights this very clearly. The agreement between George from the Yankee Boys and Rick from Pit Stop Kennels, where Mechanic was bred,
Yes.
was that if Mechanic made champion, Rick would get him back immediately for stud purposes.
Ah, the promise. And this is a powerful demonstration of integrity, isn't it? It
Yeah.
transcends that immediate competitive impulse. The Yankee Boys now had a champion, a dog that could command massive fees, potentially continue to win titles, bring huge prestige.
Absolutely. They understandably wanted to keep showing him.
Of course they did. But the ethical code in that world, it seems to dictate that a man is only as good as his word, especially when it comes to the preservation and future of valued bloodlines. And George kept his promise.
Even though it meant giving up potential financial gain and glory.
Exactly. He forfeited that.
Yep.
Mechanic was retired immediately to stud back at Pit Stop Kennels. Kept his word.
And the immediate aftermath is just so characteristic of these competitive environments, isn't it? Everyone who had previously avoided him, the source says, people who didn't want any part of him when he was actively competing.
Suddenly they were lining up.
Suddenly they all wanted to breed to him. They wanted a piece of the now validated champion blood.
But Rick, the dog's original breeder, the one who nursed him back from near death after the theft, he delivered the final and frankly deeply satisfying line. Reflecting the ultimate purpose of the whole endeavor, he apparently told them all, sorry too late, he is retired to stud for good back at Pit Stop.
Perfect. The purpose of that intense competitive career was fulfilled, wasn't it? Mechanic's ability was proven beyond any doubt. And the goal of perpetuating that line, using those certified genetics, was realized. End of story for his fighting career.
Precisely. The performance validated the pedigree.
So the story of Soulmate Mechanic is just phenomenal in its detail, but its true historical value really lies in its legacy, doesn't it? Section 7 looks at the legacy of a champion, and it actually begins with an acknowledgement of the Yankee Boys' overall success.
Yeah, the source specifically congratulates George from the Yankee Boys for his continued success around that time. It notes he had made Sulik Gambler and Sulik Londi champions, as well as 3 other champions. That totals 5 champions in just 5 years.
5 champions in 5 years. That's an incredible rate of success.
It really is an incredible rate of selection, preparation, and execution. The source emphatically states that's what I call bulldogging, brother. It's high praise within that community.
Okay, wait. If the Yankee Boys organization was that successful, what specific element of their bulldog and brother approach do the sources seem to credit most? Was it just finding good dogs? Or was it conditioning, strategy? Is there an implied methodology there?
That's a good question. It seems to be the combination of sharp selection and rigorous preparation. The sources repeatedly emphasize the consistency of their conditioning. Remember that chiseled granite description?
Yeah.
And also their disciplined adherence to the cultural rules, being men of their word, unlike the Joe M situation. They clearly possessed a sharp understanding of the dogs they were matching against, and they knew precisely when to transition a dog from the competitive square to the stud yard, like with Mechanic. Their success wasn't random. It sounds like institutionalized expertise.
And Mechanic's individual story is just the perfect synthesis of that expertise combined with, well, raw, innate talent in game. It provides such deep, almost a didactic insight into the APBT culture for anyone who really seeks to understand it. We've seen pretty much every facet detailed in these sources.
We truly have. We saw the specific, rigorous breeding goals set by Rick at Pit Stop. We analyzed the systematic training methodology through the controlled environment of the roles. We understood the sheer rigor of weight cutting and the extreme discipline required to hit those specific weights precisely every time.
Right.
We observed the cultural importance of game testing, vividly demonstrated through his brother Mogin's incredible crawling game. And we saw the dynamics of kennel rivalries and, frankly, character judgments with the incidents involving Joe M and Joe T.
And crucially, we've seen the crystal clear, non-negotiable criteria for achieving champion status, those 3 verified wins against other proven winners, overseen by respected referees like Mr. Bill and Ray. By immersing ourselves in just this one narrative, the story of one dog, you gain immense context for the specific history of these APBT lines. You really understand the high stakes involved in competitive breeding, where every ounce, every scratch, and crucially, every word of a promise matters.
And this brings us back, full circle almost, to the ultimate prize, which isn't just champion status. It's that designation register of merit, or ROM.
Right, you mentioned that at the start.
Yeah, and this isn't achieved simply by winning 3 matches. Champion status, the switch, that's achieved through your own competitive wins. ROM status, however, is achieved through your proven successful progeny. A dog has to produce a certain number of offspring who also become winners or champions themselves to validate its genetics and earn that ROM designation.
Ah, okay. So champion status is the proof of the dog's own performance, but register of merit, ROM, is the proof of its genetic prepotency, its ability to pass those winning traits on.
You've got it, exactly.
Yeah.
Mechanic's competitive career, those 3 brutal fights we detailed, that was essentially his audition. His subsequent stud record, producing winners, that was the final certification of his lasting legacy.
So the fighting was the test.
The fighting was the test. The entire competitive history we've analyzed today, the incredible resilience after the theft, the devastating finishing power, the undeniable game under duress, it was all documentation for the pedigree book, in a way. It's a method of saying, this is what excellence looked like in this highly specialized field. And it was documented down to the minute, down to the pound, ensuring that these bloodlines and the sacrifices made by those who perpetuated them are preserved for future reference.
And again, just a reminder for everyone listening, this history and so much more can be found on the web and the YouTube channel APBT INFO. Hundreds of hours detailing the history of the APBT and the game dogs, dedicated to documenting this specific culture and lineage. It's quite a resource.
It really is.
Okay, so let's quickly recap the key takeaways from this deep dive into the life of Cape Mechanic Rom. We saw him overcome that incredible early life trauma, specifically the devastating theft that left him near death at just 41 pounds, only to be nursed back by dedicated individuals like Yankee Greg. We traced his rapid ascent to champion status in just 3 decisive matches, each one showcasing a different kind of challenge. The relentless stamina needed to outlast Nixon in that hour-long fight.
Right.
The tactical game and sheer pain tolerance required to defeat the larger, slick head dog poker, despite giving up weight and taking those chest leaks.
Yeah, that was critical.
And finally, that lightning-fast, utterly dominant finish against the respected Dirty Lamar to seal the championship in only 12 minutes.
And we also highlighted those non-competitive factors that really define the top tier of this world. Things like the strict ethics of keeping one's word, perfectly exemplified by George honoring that agreement with Rick.
Returning mechanic for stud duties.
Exactly. Ensuring mechanic was returned even though he was at the peak of his competitive value. That action really demonstrated that for some, pedigree preservation ultimately trumped immediate financial glory or continued fame. The entire narrative really illustrates the crucial roles of specific breeders like Rick and handlers like the Yankee Boys as key figures in a culture that clearly valued documentation, performance, and integrity perhaps above all else.
Okay, so now here is a final thought for you, the listener, to consider as you reflect on Mechanic's journey. Something connecting his intense preparation and that incredible fighting prowess with his eventual destiny as a stud dog. We focused heavily today on the physical performance, the speed, the strength, the stamina, all the things that secured his champion status. But the source material strongly implies that the competitive career was always, fundamentally, a means to an end.
So maybe ask yourself this: how does the absolute necessity of this high-stakes, uncompromising, often brutal competitive performance ultimately define the future of a bloodline? What does this source material suggest is the true prize of achieving champion status, and then subsequently that Register of Merit designation? It probably isn't the trophy, or the purse money, or even the prestige of the win itself. It's more likely the ultimate validation of the genetic material, proven under the most extreme pressure imaginable. It certifies that dog, in this case Mechanic, as an indispensable asset for breeding the next generation. His purpose, in their eyes, was fulfilled when his ability to perform was proven beyond any shadow of a doubt. The fighting ring was the crucible, yes, but the pedigree book, that was always the final destination.
A truly profound thought to end on. The documentation tells the story long after the dust settles in the square. And remember, if you want to explore this history and many more stories of the American Pit Bull Terrier, you can find hundreds of hours of related history on the web and YouTube channel APBT INFO.
Thank you for joining us for this incredibly detailed deep dive into the history of Fun Mechanic ROM. It's been fascinating to unpack.
It really has. Until next time, keep digging into the details. We'll see